To begin this review, I have a proposition for you. How often have video games made you consider your choices in life? How often have video games altered your views? I think most people would say not very often. A game changing someone's perspective has rarely happened from the contents of the game itself. Usually this self-reflection will come from the player themselves, and sometimes that self-reflection can come from unexpected places. For me personally, a bizarre-looking game appeared on my Steam recommended page called Moe Era. I never heard of this game before, but to me it was very clearly a visual novel game. The description of the game intrigued me. It was almost too cliché. Welcome to Moe Era, the era of cute things. It has everything but a hero to help 4 adorable girls. You're the one they're waiting for. Then, when I scroll down to the game's About section, one line in the description stuck out to me. I was having several thoughts when I came across these lines, one of which was answered in the reviews of the game at the bottom of the page. So, my question was answered, and I immediately downloaded it off the Steam page, and soon enough began to play it. Suffice to say, it was a unique experience. The game's contents were quite different from many games I've played over the years. Even the comparable Doki Doki Literature Club in many aspects is a drastically different game, and which I feel Moe Era, in which it achieves, is far superior to Doki Doki. And after much thinking and replaying of the game, I believe it might be one of the most well-written games I've experienced in the year of 2020. I would like to note from here on forwards, there will be spoilers for the game, so if you want to play the game without knowing how it plays out, feel free to go to this timestamp. An important detail that adds to the tonnage of the game is the title itself. Moe Era is a corrupted version of the word moirai, which is a variation of the term moirai, oftentimes abbreviated to as the moirai, or as translated to in English, the Fates. Fates in ancient Greek mythology are the 3 sister goddesses that control how a mortal's life begins and ends. The goddess who begins a mortal's life is Clotho, or the Roman equivalent, Nona. She is usually characterized as the goddess who spun the thread of life. For the moirai, the process of a cloth was used as a representation of the destiny of a mortal's life. The goddess who would measure the length of a mortal's life was Lachesis, or Decima. Then finally, the goddess who cut the thread ending the mortal's life was Atropos, or in Roman, Morta. Now, this may beg the question, why do these Greek goddesses matter? Why is this of note, and why am I mentioning this? In the Roman names, they are almost identical to the names of the 3 characters in Moe Era. This was by no means a coincidence. The game even addresses this and reveals that the Roman equivalents are in fact the real characters' names. The game then proceeds to describe what these characters' real purposes are in the game. Their mission is identical to the moirai of Greek mythology. In fact, the game itself tells you they are the moirai. This revelation will build upon the previously mentioned purpose and message of the game. Life and purpose itself. When you really break this game down to its core, it's about deities telling you and instructing you how to have a meaningful life. Not only the character that represents you, but also you, the player, who is playing the game. There's a reason why the pursuit of a meaningful life works so well in a visual novel format. Would the message of seeking purpose and meaning to life work as well if it was delivered in a game like Call of Duty or Forza Horizon? I personally don't believe it'd work. A big aspect of those genres of games, and many other games in general, is escapism. Visual novels are no exception. It's just their escapism is so wildly different. Instead of being a killer machine and mowing down any possible threat to your existence like in a shooter, visual novels are designed to be relatable escapisms. They're designed to be an idealistic version of your own life, with the purpose of most visual novels is to make friends or start relationships. They are designed for social outcasts as a way for them to fit in. They are intended for people who do not have a clear vision of themselves, so they absorb themselves into a fantasy version of themselves to escape their own unfortunate reality. Moe Era, throughout the game, subtly touches on the fantasies commonly found within visual novels, with intentionally placing sexually implicit imagery and phrasings in certain sections of the game in an almost mocking fashion. Many people would argue games in these genres are often sexist or devaluing of women, and I personally wouldn't disagree with that argument. What I think is that these games aren't setting out to be intentionally devaluing women to the viewer. The purpose of the game isn't to dislike women or made to form negative opinions of women. What I think visual novels are trying to do is indulge viewers of their own fantasy of romance and relationships. So they inherently create this unrealistic and cartoonish version of women, where there's almost a tunnel vision attraction to the player's character, and the female characters never having interactions or interests with any other male characters, if there even is other male characters in the game. This game shows this aspect of male interaction with the character of Ermi. Interesting thing to note, much like other characters in the game, his name is also a reference to Greek mythology, with his name being a shorthand version of the name Hermes. As far as I could find, there is no discernible connection to the Greek deity of Hermes aside from the name. An interesting detail about Hermes is his beliefs about himself. He believes his life has no meaning, and for him, seemingly no purpose. Ermi at first glance in the game comes across as a bit of an irritant, with him generally being unprepared for school and social situations. This makes the player view his character as lacking an understanding of his surroundings. Overall, his appearance is meant to be painted in a negative light. This is also bolstered with some of the in-game dialogue. But if you look at a fair amount of his characteristics, they're not that discernible from protagonists in other visual novels or even some anime. A good example of these features is Ermi's overall design. The hair, the outfit, and the general physical design of him fit all the hallmarks of a generic male character. This overall generic character design also complements the actual character's personality, where typically in visual novels, animes, mangas, and elsewhere, they would typically have a clumsy, disorganized, unsociable personality and generally be a messy character. These characters exist to make the viewer relate to them, but also not to challenge the viewer. If the character is deemed to have higher qualities or has better characteristics than the viewer themselves, it can create anxiety in the viewer. For example, if the character is intelligent, charismatic, or attractive, the viewer is no longer able to relate to them because they see that character is superior to them, and so it makes the viewer raise a few questions and inherently take them out to the media. They may wonder, why is the character able to have a sea of relationships and have a huge amount of friends with very little effort, yet me in reality I am not able to? Maybe it's because of the way the characters are written, or maybe it's because the characters are very one-dimensional. The answer to all these questions can be quite clear in these forms of entertainment. They aren't meant to reflect reality. They are a projection of a fantasy that is designed to resemble reality. If these media forms don't make it abundantly clear it is an exaggerated fantasy, it doesn't let the viewer see it as a reality if they know it's a fantasy. Sometimes this unawareness can lead to the metaphorical dark abyss, the consumption of the mind-numbing content to smooth the brain. This can lead to the most isolated of people forgetting reality and believing the characters they see on their screen. Ironically, the desire for life leads to the destruction of one. Attempting to find a placeholder for your life can make you the archetype. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of an archetype is the following: the original pattern or model of which all things of the same type are representations or copies. Prototype, also a perfect example. 2. A transcendent entity that is a real pattern of which existing things are imperfect representations. This word is used in literature, film, and other media outlets to describe a sort of generic character role, personality, or character type. This is replicated in a lot of other media. Examples of archetypes could be the hero, the love interest, the loser, the evil scientist, the smart kid who's shy, the quiet, well-read kid, the popular kid, and many other examples. The issue of character archetypes is not left unnoticed in the game. The characters in the game are meant to replicate archetypes, and if you become closer with the characters, gradually they will begin opening up to you about their insecurities and their unhappiness in life. Moe Era isn't the only game to be critical of the way visual novels are written. For example, Doki Doki Literature Club is an example where characters are parodies of these archetypes. But what makes Moe Era far more unique in comparison to other criticisms of visual novels is the way the characters are written. They are written to sound and act like real people. For example, if you do not comfort the characters when they open up to you, they will get upset and leave you. Which, in comparison to Doki Doki Literature Club, it has none of that. There's very little decisions or interactions you have to make in Doki Doki that have consequences. This causes the gameplay to feel railroaded at points. The characters in Doki Doki are parodies of archetypes, but they themselves become archetypes in their own way. Throughout the game, they're simply being a parody of something, without adding development to it. This does not make it better than the material it's parodying. It just makes the product come across as lazy and low effort. This is especially true if you are trying to imply an idea and don't fully develop and express that message. Now, throughout this review, you may have noticed that I've been consistently and constantly comparing Moe Era to Doki Doki Literature Club. There is a reason why I am doing this. I believe it is fair to compare Moe Era to Doki Doki Literature Club is because whenever I read Steam reviews, or frankly any reviews I could find about Moe Era, every single one of them compared or at least mentioned Doki Doki. The reason I believe the two are so intertwined is because of Doki Doki's monopoly on this concept. They were the first mainstream game to criticize the visual novel genre, through the use of mimicry and parody in order to demonstrate their unique take on the genre. Another detail that furthers the similarities is the game's heavy focus on their characters. Sure, the characters and the writing are very important parts of visual novels as a whole, but in a sizable amount of visual novels, that doesn't inherently mean the characters are well written at all. This is how Doki Doki stuck out from the crowd. Its characters and the way they interact with the player were vital. We can see this, for example, with characters like Sayori and Monica. Both of their characters hint and often indicate what their revealed personality will be. For example, the way Sayori will eventually start acting in odd and peculiar ways in an attempt to tell the player she's not as happy-go-lucky as the game and the character leads you to believe. This culminates in Sayori's unfortunate demise. This is an example of how Doki Doki was able to set itself apart. It leads you into an obvious archetype found within these types of games, and hits you with an apparent suicidal personality. We can again see this strategy in every single Doki Doki character, most notably in Monica. The game tells us through the dialogue that she doesn't have a lot going on. She's a leader, intelligent, she plays piano, and that's about it. She vaguely shows interest in you, but nothing too committed. Much like her friendship with the other characters, we don't see an awful lot of her interactions with you or her friends. This is until the game reveals her to be a lot less innocent than she lets on. This is visible when Monika controls the game and is trying to kill off the other girls in the game to be with your character. This is how Doki Doki stuck out from the crowd, its characters and the way they interact with the player. There are other examples of this shocking reveal in the game, like the personalities of both Yuri and Natsuki, but in comparison to Sayori and Monika, these two are far less developed and have far less impact on the story of the game. So, with that being said, the character arcs of Sayori and Monika were the reason why the game had such an appeal and allowed it to take off. The unique personalities in both of these characters allowed Doki Doki to break the mold from the bland and generic visual novel landscape. This in turn would allow Doki Doki to become a very dominant force in the visual novel genre. Here's an interesting thought to contrast the previously mentioned Doki Doki with Moe Era. Why is it that Moe Era has not achieved the same success as Doki Doki? The fanbase for the game is essentially non-existent, and there was very little to no merchandising I could find. To add to this, I had never heard of this game before it showed up on my Steam recommended page. You can argue Moe Era is a unique game with a very unusual yet compelling story that has references to various works of literature throughout time. Another detail to note is in almost every single review I could find for this game, whenever it compares Moe Era to Doki Doki, it implies or states Moe Era is a superior game. Whether it is in regards to the writing, characters, or the overall message, the popular opinion I have found is that Moe Era is a superior visual novel game to Doki Doki. This all leads back to the question I had asked earlier: why has it not achieved the same or greater success? How is it that Doki Doki has been able to sustain a meteoric rise in popularity, creating a fanbase for itself and maintaining merchandising, while on the contrary, Moe Era has none? Well, one of the possible reasons I thought of was simple: the previously mentioned appeal. The reason any game, or frankly any media, falls under the term mainstream is because of its appeal. It appeals to the majority of audiences. The majority of people who could consume that media will watch and enjoy it. Oftentimes, the mainstream appeal can be the deciding factor for a media outlet's destiny. Some form of media are more unfortunate than others, and I would argue that Doki Doki is one of the fortunate few. The game's popularity remained relatively dormant until YouTubers began to play it, exposing Doki Doki to its core audience, young adolescents. Doki Doki has this unique appeal over teenagers, with its themes of depression, unhappiness with life, and many other aspects of emotional unhappiness that teenagers can resonate with. But this is also compounded with the way the game tells these feelings. Its unique style in disguising itself as a cute, innocent, anime-inspired visual novel. It shouldn't be needed to be said, but anime is generally quite popular with adolescents and above, in one way or another. So, it is possible to both enjoy Doki Doki's cute aesthetics and giving it that generic, silly, romantic style a lot of visual novels and some broader media outlets have. This is also contrary to the edgier crowd of people who still enjoy Doki Doki for its depictions of cartoon characters being murdered and reveling in the unstable personalities in the Doki Doki characters. This is used as a way to express feelings of rebellion and emotional unhappiness. If you go into any Doki Doki related feed, you'll see these two types of groups, whether it be various subreddits or maybe an Instagram account. You will see these two divergent groups of weebs and teenagers conversing into one community. This is how Doki Doki has maintained its audience. It harnesses the aesthetics and interests of two separate niche groups. But despite this, the audience Doki Doki has maintained for over 3 years now is also to its detriment. If any audience appeals to a certain group of people, Those outside of this group in some cases will view these people as cringy or toxic. What this means is that people will not want to associate with this medium, as they associate the medium with individuals they do not want to associate with. This will condition them to dislike the medium as a whole. What this cycle means is certain media forms will see a mass exodus of their audience who don't want to fall under the stereotype of the fanbase. But they do this as they fear alienation and isolation from their friends and their circles. This is because they don't want to be judged and looked down upon for participating in cringy media. We can see this happen with fanbases like the Rick and Morty audience, or more relevant to the topic, the broader anime community being shunned by the mainstream. It's less visible now as there are far more people in the mainstream that don't mind showing their interest in anime in one form or another.
Evangelion?
Neon Genesis Evangelion. Wow. What does he do?
But there was certainly a far more viewable stigma towards anime viewers in the past, and still holds in certain aspects of mainstream society today. When stigmas take hold of the perception of a fanbase, over time that perception can become the reality, which luckily for us there is precedent for. We can see this with the Doki Doki audience. The reason I brought up alienation, isolation, and stereotyping is because all three of these descriptions have happened to Doki Doki. Since their fanbase is filled with young teenagers aged between 13 and 15, possibly above and below, the audience is prone to a lot of toxicity, cringe, and awkwardness that is generally prone to people as a whole during these ages. What this means is that people who typically would enjoy the game stray away because they do not want to be associated with the young adolescent fanbase. What this means is that people who typically would like the game stray away because they do not want to be associated with the young adolescents. Maybe because they're cringy, more likely they do not want to be reminded of a previous past. Going back to earlier, when I was mentioning the reasons for the appeal of Doki Doki, another factor is the simplicity. It does not propose a solution for unhappiness with life. It does not propose a solution to any woes or issues it brings up. What this means is that audiences who wish to revel in this emotional distress and unhappiness can flock to Doki Doki believing they have found a solution for their problems, when really they haven't found any. They simply have found another way to regurgitate the information they already know, just in a different format. This is comparable to Moe Era, where the characters have been implying, directly or indirectly throughout their story, most people do not amount to anything in their lives. As this is the main crux of the story, it does not end with that simple question. All the main characters' endings, stories, and the real ending of the game all lead you to a conclusion. A way to find a meaning in your own life. Whether it be work, fun, productivity, it does not matter. What matters is how you enjoy your life on this earth. What makes your life special and unique is finding your own way to experience and demonstrate meaning into your life. The character Taya, upon revealing herself to you, directly tells you in the game, there are many things in the world you or I are not equipped to deal with in this world. There are a lot of issues you're not going to be able to resolve or understand in life, but that is unfortunately going to be an aspect of life that will never go away. So you should enjoy what you know and understand, and you shouldn't distress over things that will never stop distressing you. This kind of thinking, writing, and conclusion is far more profound than any statement on the inequalities or the unfortunate realities in life. I think it is far more profound than Doki Doki's message because you can agree or disagree with the reasoning or conclusion that Moe Era comes to. But what is undeniable is Moe Era has come to a logical conclusion based off reality itself. There is a possible discussion of ideas and possible change you can argue with to the resolution of Moe Era. You cannot advance your conclusions on your life off the statement that life isn't fair or life is sad. This is the reason why Moe Era has not achieved the mainstream appeal of Doki Doki. You won't find the type of messaging in Moe Era on a Hot Topic shirt. It does not appeal to a specific age group or a niche community. You don't have to know a lot of Greek mythology to enjoy the game. You don't have to know a lot of literature to enjoy the game, as both Greek mythology and the literature will either be explained to you or won't be relevant to the story. This is why it is a far better game than Doki Doki. It does not appeal to emotions or media you already like. It makes an attempt to appeal to you as a person. It is a game in which it makes an attempt to reason with life itself. The game is attempting to give meaning and reason towards life. This is why Moe Era is not as popular as Doki Doki, despite the facts presented that Moe Era is a better game. The way the game is written, the message of the game, does not have a demographical appeal. It's not followed the simplicity or the horror elements of Doki Doki. It's not attempt to be something it's not. What this means is that in comparison to Doki Doki, it does not have a niche societal grouping it belongs to. It's a visual novel game, obviously, but you cannot lump it in with other visual novel games. You cannot lump it in with Doki Doki. You certainly cannot lump it in with the dozens of trash tier, bland, generic visual novel games out there. It's a unique game that does not have a community to call home. In the current state, the only way people can describe Moe Era is comparing it to Doki Doki, which is an unfortunate fate for the game to be permanently in an inferior game shadow. Doki Doki fans won't like it, for its story is rather peaceful and wholesome in comparison to Doki Doki's previously mentioned shock horror elements. But also, people who don't like Doki Doki's fanbase or the game itself will be turned off by Moe Era by assuming it's a clone. Regardless of arguments or counter-arguments whether someone would enjoy the game or not, there's a very key point in all of this. Comparing Doki Doki to Moe Era is quite ironic. After all, a game that sets its entire message about setting yourself apart from other people, telling the viewer to express themselves and how they see fit, ignoring what the groupthink is, a unique game that tells the player not to be afraid of being unique in order to enjoy the life you want, is only discussed in comparison to other games, and is considered by many a shadow of a game that delves into none of these topics. Thanks for watching this video. This is quite a new thing I've done. This is the first time I've done a video like this, so depending on how well it does or my general outlook of the video, I might do more. Stay tuned. I will admit I had a lot of fun making this video so far. At the time of this recording, this is just me making the audio, so who knows, I'll see how the editing goes. I imagine I'll have a lot of fun with that. This took way too much time to make. I wish it took a bit quicker, but you know, that's how life is. You're never gonna get it perfect on your first go. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope the video came out as coherent.